Let's get started. Story number 1.
I moved to a small town in Pennsylvania 2 years ago after living in the city for most of my life. I needed the change. Things had fallen apart fast. My job, my relationship, my sense of direction. I thought small town life might give me peace, a rhythm, something simpler. I rented a 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, right where the woods begin, and I told myself it was a fresh start. I took up jogging not long after I moved in. At first, it was just about keeping busy. I didn't know anyone yet, didn't have a job lined up, and the silence out here was deafening. Running gave me structure. I'd wake up, make coffee, stretch, and hit the trails just after sunrise. There was an old railway path that had been converted into a running trail. Gravel, lined with trees, quiet, perfect. The first month was uneventful, peaceful even. The mornings were crisp, the trail deserted except for the occasional deer darting into the brush. I'd run 3 miles out and 3 back. The route passed an old maintenance shed from the rail days, then curved along a creek before heading into denser woods. On the return stretch, I'd always pass the same small clearing with a broken wooden bench and a rusted trash can next to it. Nothing remarkable. Then, in early November, things started feeling off. It started subtly. One morning, about halfway through my run, I caught the feeling that someone was behind me. It wasn't a sound, just that sensation you get, like you're being watched. I turned around, expecting to see another jogger or maybe a cyclist, but there was no one there. The trail behind me was empty. I shrugged it off and kept going. But it kept happening. Not every day, but often enough to make me start noticing. Once, I even thought I heard footsteps behind me, perfectly matching my pace. I stopped abruptly, hoping to catch whoever it was off guard. Nothing. Just the trees and the sound of my own breathing. One morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. It wasn't a dream, at least not one I remembered. But I had that heavy, lingering dread that clings to you after something unsettling. I decided to run it off, hoping that maybe moving my body would help shake the feeling. The woods were different that morning. It had rained overnight, and a mist hung low over the trail. Everything was wet and quiet. I remember my footsteps being louder than usual, the gravel crunching beneath me like it was trying to fill the silence. I'd barely gone a mile when I saw someone ahead of me. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, hood up, walking slowly along the trail. I was relieved at first. It was the first time I'd seen anyone else out that early. As I got closer, I noticed he wasn't walking with purpose. He was just there, almost like he was waiting. He turned slightly as I approached, but I couldn't see his face. The hood cast a shadow, and with the mist and the early light, it felt like he was a silhouette. Still, I gave a polite nod as I passed. He didn't nod back. He didn't move. I kept running, quickening my pace, heart thudding louder than before. I glanced back once. He was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Just gone. I told myself he'd stepped off the trail or maybe turned around. People can be strange. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next few runs were uneventful. No strange figures, no footsteps. I started to wonder if I'd imagined it. Maybe the mist and the morning light played tricks on me. Maybe I was just lonely, spending too much time in my own head. Then came the morning. I found the shoe. It was lying just off the path near the clearing with the broken bench. A running shoe, caked with mud, torn on the side, the kind that had clearly been sitting out there for a while. But something about it looked fresh. The laces were still tied neatly. It hadn't been chewed on by animals or completely soaked through like you'd expect. I picked it up, looked around. No one. I left it where it was and kept running. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shoe. The way it sat so perfectly placed, not tossed or lost, but placed. Like someone wanted it to be found. The next morning, I decided not to jog. I told myself I needed a break, that I was just tired. But around 6 a.m., I found myself staring out the window, coffee in hand, looking at the trees beyond the backyard. That's when I saw him, the same figure from the trail, standing at the edge of the woods, still, watching. I dropped my mug. By the time I got to the door and stepped out onto the porch, he was gone. I called the sheriff's office, told them someone was trespassing. They sent a deputy who looked around, asked a few questions, but found nothing. He said people sometimes camped in the woods, that maybe it was just a vagrant passing through. But I knew what I saw. The next few days were quiet. I didn't jog. I barely left the house. Then the power went out. It was around 5:30 in the morning. I woke up to complete darkness. No streetlights outside, no hum of the refrigerator. Nothing. I checked my phone. It still worked, and I saw that the outage was local. A downed line, nothing serious. I decided to get dressed and step outside for a moment. The sky was starting to lighten with that early blue haze. I walked out to the edge of the trail, telling myself I was just stretching my legs. The shoe was back, the same one. Sitting in the middle of the path now. Upright. Laces tied. Clean. That was when I heard the footsteps. Soft at first, then growing louder. Not from the trail behind me. From the woods. From the trees. I turned, scanning the tree line. There was nothing, just brush and shadows and the wind pushing through the branches. But the footsteps continued, deliberate, slow, moving toward me. I backed away, heart racing, eyes locked on the darkness. And then he stepped out. The same figure. Tall, hooded, face still obscured. But he was different now. Wet. His clothes clung to him like he'd just come out of a river. His shoes squished on the gravel, leaving dark prints behind. I wanted to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. He raised one hand and pointed at me. Then he opened his mouth, but there was no sound. Just darkness. A black void where his mouth should be. I turned and ran. Not along the trail. Back to the house. I slammed the door, locked it, and didn't move for hours. That afternoon, I packed a bag and drove to a motel in town. I didn't care how crazy I sounded. I told the desk clerk I'd seen someone in the woods, that I didn't feel safe. She didn't even flinch, just handed me a key and said, "You're not the first." I stayed there for 3 days. When I finally went back, I expected the worst. I expected the house to be vandalized, broken into something, but it was fine. Too fine. Clean. Still. Like nothing had ever happened. But I knew. I stopped jogging completely. I started driving into town for groceries, even though it was only a mile away. I didn't walk the trail, didn't go near the woods. And then, one morning, I woke up with mud on my sheets, just a smear at the foot of the bed. I hadn't been outside. I checked the locks. Nothing was broken, no windows open, but the mud was there, damp, fresh. That night, I barely slept. I kept the lights on, clutching a kitchen knife like it would help. I heard him again, running this time. Not walking, running. Footsteps tearing down the hallway. When I opened the bedroom door, no one was there. But the shoe was, sitting neatly in the middle of the hallway. I left the house that night and never went back. I moved in with my sister across the state. I haven't been near the woods since. I haven't jogged, haven't run, haven't even walked alone down a quiet street. But it's not over, because yesterday morning when I opened the door to my sister's house to get the mail, there it was, the shoe. Clean, tied, waiting. Story the end.
Story number 2.
I picked up jogging again after my father died. It wasn't anything formal, just a few laps around the neighborhood to get the weight off and clear my head. Grief makes everything heavy, especially your limbs. My dad had been a quiet man, military background, the kind of guy who ran 5 miles before breakfast and told no one about it. I guess in some way I was trying to honor him, maybe understand him, by doing the thing he loved most. It started on a Thursday, late summer. I remember because the heat was just beginning to break. The evening sky burned orange and gold, and the air had that strange post-rain stillness. The sun dipped low behind the trees as I left the house. I ran through the residential stretch of my small town. Modest houses, cracked sidewalks, overgrown hedges. Nothing unusual. About a mile in, I cut through an alley that bordered the edge of the old cemetery. I didn't plan it. My usual route was blocked off with construction, and I wasn't in the mood to double back. So I turned down the alley and passed behind the cemetery wall. Most people avoid it, especially after dark, but I wasn't superstitious. The graves were mostly from the 1800s, forgotten and crumbling. There was a rusted iron fence that ran around it, mostly intact, with patches missing near the back. Through the bars, you could see the tops of headstones, black and leaning, and old trees with roots that looked like hands reaching out of the soil. I was about halfway past the cemetery when I noticed the sound. Footsteps. Not my own. These were behind me. Faint, steady, rhythmic. I slowed. The footsteps slowed. I stopped. They stopped. I turned around, scanning the empty alley. Nothing. But the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I shook it off. Probably Echo. Or maybe another jogger behind me who'd turned off. I picked up my pace and finished my loop. Nothing else strange happened that night. The next day, same time, I laced up my shoes and went again. I thought about avoiding the cemetery alley, but I didn't want to give in to paranoia. The day had been hard. Mom had called crying again, and my boss was on my case about deadlines. I needed the run. I turned down the alley. The moment I passed the first row of crooked headstones, I felt it again, that crawling sensation down my spine. And then, the footsteps. This time, I stopped immediately and whipped around. No one. But I noticed something I hadn't the day before. The gate at the far end of the fence, the one that had been rusted shut for years, was open about a foot, just slightly ajar. I stood there, my breath coming hard, staring at the gap in the fence. Then something moved. A figure, tall, grayish, and fast, darted between the headstones and disappeared behind a tree. I didn't wait. I ran. I cut the run short and walked the rest of the way home, heart still hammering. The next day, I didn't go jogging, or the day after. But by Sunday, I couldn't sit still. My dad's birthday was coming up. The grief sat like a weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. I needed the air, I needed the motion, so I put on my shoes and told myself I'd stick to the main roads. No shortcuts, no alleys. It worked. I jogged a solid 3 miles through well-lit streets and saw 2 other runners. I started to feel silly about the whole thing. Of course, it wasn't a ghost, maybe a homeless guy or a kid playing a prank. I was letting my emotions get the better of me. Then I got home and saw the shoe prints. They were on the sidewalk leading up to my door, bare footprints, wet like someone had stepped out of a river. They started at the edge of my yard and ended at the welcome mat. I didn't know what to do. I stood there for a long time, just staring. My neighbor, Mrs. Cantrell, walked by with her little dachshund and gave me a polite wave. I forced a smile, said nothing, and watched the prints evaporate in the evening heat. I didn't tell anyone. How do you explain something like that? Monday, I went to work like normal, but everything felt wrong. People's voices seemed distant. The computer screen gave me a headache. By lunch, I decided I was done being scared. It was a coincidence. Maybe I tracked water back with me and forgot. Maybe I was just unraveling from the stress. That night, I went back, jogged the same route, even the alley. It was quiet, still. The gate was closed again. Relief washed over me like cold water. I laughed at myself a little, shook my head. It was all in my... The smell hit me before the sound. Earth, wet soil, and something sour. Like rotting leaves. Then the footsteps. I turned around. This time, I saw him clearly. He stood just inside the fence, by the gate. Thin, pale, no shoes. His shirt clung to his chest like it was soaked, and his mouth was open slightly, like he was about to say something. But no sound came out. He lifted one arm as if reaching for me. I bolted. I ran so hard I twisted my ankle on a curb 3 blocks away. I limped home, slammed the door, and locked it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called in sick. I spent the day researching. There wasn't much, but I found one article buried in the archives of the local paper from 1986. A teenage boy had gone missing near the cemetery while jogging. His name was Caleb Merrill. The article said he was training for a cross-country meet. They found his clothes folded neatly on a bench near the cemetery but never found his body. The weird part? He went missing on September 14th, exactly 35 years ago. That night, I heard the footsteps again, not on the trail, in my house. It was around 2:30 a.m. I was in bed, lights off, pretending to sleep. The footsteps started in the hallway, slow, deliberate. I lay there, frozen. They stopped outside my bedroom door. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move for hours. When the sun came up, there were wet footprints on the carpet, leading away from my room. I moved in with my cousin the next day. Told him my pipes had burst. He didn't ask questions. I slept in his guest room with the lights on and didn't jog once that week. But the dreams started. Always the same. I'm running. The air is thick, like breathing through mud. The cemetery is ahead. Someone is behind me. I never see his face, but I hear him. Closer and closer. A voice in my head whispers, "Stop running. He wants to finish." One night I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. Another I woke with a scrape on my ankle, 3 inches long. Red. Fresh. I finally told my cousin everything. He didn't laugh. He looked pale. "I heard about that kid," he said. "My dad told me once. Said the ghost shows up to people who run near the graveyard, but only around the anniversary. Said it's like he's stuck in the loop trying to finish that last run." Why me? I asked. He didn't have an answer. I went back to the trail on the 14th. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could break it, finish what he started. I wore running shoes and my dad's old hoodie. I ran the whole loop, past the cemetery, through the alley. The gate was wide open. I stopped, stared. A figure stood near the center of the graveyard. I stepped closer. It was the boy. But this time he wasn't pale. He looked tired, worn. He pointed at the path. I ran. I ran harder than I ever had, through the alley, past the old oak tree, past the water fountain near the elementary school, around the old bus stop. The footsteps matched mine. Then slowly they faded. I finished the run. When I turned around, the cemetery was silent. The gate was closed. I haven't seen him since. But I jog every week now, and I never take shortcuts, never stop near the fence, and if I ever hear footsteps behind me, I don't look back. Not even once.
Story number 3.
I never liked jogging. Running just for the sake of it always felt pointless to me. But when my doctor said I needed to start taking better care of my heart, I didn't have much of a choice. High blood pressure, borderline cholesterol, and the creeping weight gain of middle age finally cornered me. So at 39, I bought a decent pair of running shoes and started jogging every evening after work. I live in a quiet suburb outside of Minneapolis, a place that's safe, clean, and just boring enough to make you forget what real tension feels like. My house backs up to a patch of woods that separates my neighborhood from the old Midtown rail line. Long decommissioned, but the trail beside it was converted into a walking and running path years ago. It was perfect, really. Not too busy, a few lights here and there, paved all the way through. No excuse not to use it. My route became routine within a week. Out of my back gate, down the slope, onto the path, then 2 miles down to the old rail bridge and back. I always ran at dusk, late enough that the path wasn't crowded, but still light enough that I didn't need a headlamp. The first week was uneventful, aside from my lungs and calves screaming at me. I saw the same people pretty often. A man in a reflective vest walking a golden retriever, a high school girl sprinting in short bursts like she was training for track, and an older couple walking hand in hand at a turtle's pace. There was comfort in the familiarity. But it was sometime in my third week when things started to feel off. It was a Tuesday, mid-September. The air was cool, the leaves just starting to turn. I was about halfway through my run when I passed a woman I hadn't seen before. She was standing completely still on the side of the path, just beyond one of the older lampposts. Her face was in shadow, but she wore running clothes, tight black leggings, a red windbreaker, and gray sneakers. At first I assumed she was stretching or maybe checking her phone, but her arms were just hanging at her sides. She wasn't moving at all. I nodded as I passed her. No reaction. Her eyes didn't even flick toward me. I ran a little faster after that, brushing it off as odd but not dangerous. People are strange sometimes. The next evening, I saw her again. Same spot, same outfit, same complete stillness. Only this time, she was facing away from the trail, her back toward me, head tilted slightly upward like she was watching the treetops sway. Her hair was dark and tied back in a low ponytail. Again, I passed her. Again, no movement, no acknowledgement. When I turned back toward home about a quarter mile later, I looked for her. She was gone. I told my wife about it that night. Claire laughed at first, said maybe she was meditating or something. Then she asked, "You sure it wasn't one of those exercise mannequins? Like for CPR or something?" It wasn't. Thursday, I skipped the run. I told myself it was because I'd worked late, but the truth was I felt uneasy. Friday, I went again. Couldn't keep letting superstition get the better of me. I didn't see her on the way out. But just as I was nearing the bridge, the halfway point of my route, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. Not fast, but steady. Too light to be a cyclist. I slowed to look back, and there she was, the woman, running about 20 feet behind me. Same outfit, same ponytail, same blank expression. Only now she was moving. I was relieved at first. Maybe she was just a quiet neighbor, after all, one of those people who gets into a zone when they run. I gave her a wave. She didn't respond. I turned back and picked up my pace a little. Her footsteps sped up too. The rhythm stayed the same, like she was syncing to my exact cadence. I ran faster. So did she. When I glanced back again, she was closer, maybe 10 feet now, and her face was blank. Not angry, not happy, just blank. Her eyes were wide open, lips slightly parted, like she was frozen in the middle of saying something and then forgot what it was. That's when I noticed her feet weren't hitting the ground. She was running, moving, but not making contact. Her body bobbed slightly as though performing the motion of jogging, but not actually doing it. She hovered, just an inch off the ground, not enough to notice unless you really looked. I stopped. She didn't. She ran right past me, but not on the trail. She glided through the trees beside the path, through them. I mean that literally. A branch clipped her side, and it passed straight through like she was smoke. Her ponytail didn't even shift. She kept going straight into the woods. Gone. No sound, no footsteps, no rustling of leaves. Just gone. I walked the rest of the way home, heart pounding, convinced I was losing my mind. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, going over every moment, every detail. It had to have been a trick of the light. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe it really was someone running beside the trail and my brain just filled in the gaps wrong. I didn't run the next day. Or the next. The following Tuesday, I finally convinced myself to go again. I was determined not to let one hallucination, if that's what it was, ruin the one healthy habit I'd finally managed to pick up. I told Claire I'd be back in 40 minutes and headed out. The air was thick with fog, heavier than usual. The trail was dim, and the old lamps cast weak yellow circles that barely pierced the mist. I made it nearly a full mile before I saw anything. At first, it was just a shape ahead of me. I thought it was a jogger, someone else stupid enough to be out in this soup. As I got closer, I saw the red windbreaker. She was standing beside the bench near the midpoint of the trail. Still. Same posture, same expression, but this time, her head turned slowly as I approached. Her eyes met mine. I don't know how to describe them. Not scary, not glowing, not dramatic. Just wrong. Too open. Too fixed. Like she was looking through me. Not at me. I stopped. So did she. We stared at each other across the fog. Then her mouth opened slowly, like a yawn in reverse. She said nothing. I backed away. She stepped forward. I turned and ran. I didn't look back until I was on my street, pounding up my driveway like something was chasing me. The yard was empty. The trail was out of sight. I collapsed on the steps and sat there for 10 minutes, trying to get my breathing under control. I didn't tell Claire. I couldn't explain it without sounding insane. That night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m., not because of a noise, but because I felt watched. I sat up in bed, ears straining in the silence. Down the hall, I heard the faint sound of shoes, like someone lightly jogging in place. Soft thuds, over and over. I got out of bed and crept to the hallway. It was dark, quiet. No one there. The sound had stopped. The next day, I found muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. Bare feet. Too small to be mine, too large for Claire's. I bleached the floor, said nothing, but I didn't go running anymore. 3 days passed without incident. Then one morning I went out to grab the paper and saw something wedged into the slats of the backyard gate. A red windbreaker, wet, cold to the touch. I threw it out. But that night, it was back, draped over the bench on our porch. I burned it in the fire pit and watched it blacken to ash. 2 nights later, I woke up again at 3:17. On the foot of the bed sat the same woman, facing away, hair tied in that low ponytail. Her shoulders rose and fell slowly, like she was breathing, if she breathed. Then she turned her head, and I saw her profile. She mouthed something, a name or a question. I couldn't move, couldn't even cry out. Claire lay beside me, completely still. I blinked, and she was gone. The next morning, Claire asked me what happened to the running shoes I kept by the back door. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're gone," she said. "Your shoes, your old ones too." I checked. They were gone, every pair I owned. That night, I heard the jogging again. Not inside the house, outside, in the yard. Soft footfalls circling the house over and over. When I finally got the courage to look, the yard was empty. But on the porch sat a new pair of running shoes, wet, gray, laces tied. I left them there. We moved a month later. Claire didn't ask questions. She just packed. I haven't jogged since. I avoid trails. I avoid dusk. I avoid red windbreakers. But every so often at exactly 3:17 a.m., I wake up and I hear footsteps, soft, rhythmic, just outside my door. Story the end.
Story number 4.
I started jogging again in late October. I was coming out of a long, bad year, divorce, job loss, and the sudden death of my mother, and it felt like the only thing I could control anymore. Something about putting one foot in front of the other, the rhythm of it, the effort of breathing through it, it helped. It helped quiet my mind, at least for the 30 or 40 minutes I could manage without falling apart. I lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside of New Haven, Connecticut. It bordered a stretch of conservation woods with a trail known as the Hayward Loop. Not very long, maybe 2.5 miles, but just enough to feel like you'd done something. People liked it because it was off the road, secluded, pretty in that New England kind of way. Autumn, especially. You could lose yourself in the reds and yellows of the trees, the smell of dry leaves and earth, the way the wind stirred through the branches like whispers. I ran it almost every evening after work, usually around 5. It was always more or less empty by then. I didn't want people seeing me out of shape, sweaty, and out of breath. I just wanted to be alone, moving forward, leaving things behind. The trail started at the edge of a residential street, curved through a wooded ravine, followed a creek for a little while, and then circled back through some thicker forest before looping around to the street again. The first time something felt wrong was about 3 weeks in. It had rained earlier in the day, and by the time I started my run, the sky had turned that strange pale color gets right before twilight, the kind of light where colors are still visible, but everything feels washed out. About a half mile in, just as I hit the creek section, I got this overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. Not just the idea that someone might be nearby, but something much more specific, like something was matching my pace just off the trail to my left. It was a subtle feeling at first, like pressure, the kind that builds at the back of your skull when you're being watched. I slowed down, pulled out one earbud, and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Just the usual sounds, leaves underfoot, the distant gurgle of the creek, some birds in the distance. I picked up the pace again, chalked it up to nerves. I had just started a new job that week, and I was sleeping terribly. I told myself it was probably a deer or a raccoon. The woods were full of them. But the feeling stuck with me through the rest of the run. The next few days were normal, at least as normal as anything felt back then. The weather got colder, the leaves thinned, the trail got quieter. I kept running, even when it hurt, even when I wanted to stop because I was afraid of what would come up in my head if I stood still too long. I didn't feel watched again, not like that, but I started to notice strange things here and there. Once, I passed a black hoodie balled up on the trail, soaked and muddy, like someone had just left it there mid-run. Another time, I saw a pair of shoes, trail runners, placed neatly on a flat rock next to the creek, soles facing out. I never saw anyone else, not once. One night, I stayed out later than usual. I had a late meeting at work, didn't start my run until almost 6:30. By then, the light was fading fast. I debated skipping it, but I needed it. I was feeling particularly restless, like I couldn't sit still or even think clearly. The sun was just about gone when I started. The trail felt different in the dark, closer, tighter, more silent. I could hear every footfall, every breath, every shift of my weight. About a mile in, I heard a second set of footsteps, not behind me, not beside me, ahead. They were faint but distinct. Soft thumps, moving at a steady pace, almost like an echo, but not quite. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. I waited, listened. Nothing. I took a few tentative steps forward. Nothing. I shook my head and laughed a little, nervous. Probably just a trick of sound bouncing off the trees. Maybe even my own footsteps playing back at me. I started running again, faster this time, wanting to finish the loop and get home. A few minutes later, I saw someone. They were about 30 yards ahead, at the curve where the trail dips near the creek. A tall figure facing away from me, standing in the middle of the path. They weren't moving, not even shifting their weight, just standing there. I slowed to a walk. "Hey," I called. No response. "Everything okay?" Nothing. I took another step forward, then another. The air felt cold, colder than it should have, like I'd stepped into a cellar. I took one more step, and the figure turned its head slightly, just enough for me to see its profile. Its face was wrong, too long. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide. The eyes were dark, like holes, not reflecting light, just absorbing it. My stomach dropped. I stepped back. The figure didn't move. I turned and ran. I don't remember the rest of that run. I remember the sound of my own breath, the blood pounding in my ears, and the overwhelming sense that if I stopped for even a second, something terrible would happen. When I finally stumbled out onto the street at the end of the loop, I nearly collapsed. My legs were shaking, my hands were numb. When I looked back, the trail was empty. I didn't go back for a week. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the light had played tricks on my eyes, that stress and exhaustion were catching up to me. I even considered seeing a therapist, but I couldn't bring myself to explain what I'd seen. How do you tell someone you think something not human is jogging that trail at night? Eventually, the need to run again outweighed the fear. I told myself I'd only go during the day. I'd take the main roads, skip the woods. I did that for a few days, pavement pounding underfoot, cars rushing past, but it wasn't the same. I missed the trees, the quiet, the sense of being somewhere separate from everything else. So I went back. Middle of the afternoon, clear skies, full sun. I brought my dog Jasper for good measure. He was a mutt, lab and shepherd, mostly muscle and nerves. I figured if anyone could sniff out danger before it reached me, it was him. He didn't want to go. When we reached the trailhead, he started pulling against the leash, whining. His hackles went up. I'd never seen him act like that before. I knelt down, rubbed his ears. "It's okay, buddy," I said. "Just a short loop." He refused to move. I had to pick him up and carry him back to the car. That should have been enough. But I went back the next day, alone. Everything seemed fine until I got to the bend near the creek again, the same place where I'd seen the figure. There was something there, a smell, like damp dirt and rot, like something left in the woods too long, and a sound barely audible over the wind. It wasn't footsteps. It was breathing, raspy, wet, close. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every instinct in my body told me that if I looked, it would be standing right behind me. So I ran. Fast. Faster than I thought I could. My lungs burned, my chest ached, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I burst out of the trees like a bullet, nearly tripping over the curb. When I got home, I went straight to the shower, stripped down, stood under the hot water for 20 minutes, tried to scrub the smell off me, but I could still feel it. That night, I dreamed of running, not jogging, running full speed, blind and panicked. Something was chasing me. I could hear it, breathing, shuffling, gaining ground. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing, hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. The next morning, I found something on my porch, a single muddy footprint, barefoot, human-sized. I stopped running after that. Weeks passed. I avoided the trail. Started driving to a gym in a nearby town, running laps on the treadmill. It was boring, sterile, fluorescent, but it was safe. I started to feel normal again. I even went a few days without thinking about the trail. Then, one night, as I was leaving the gym, I saw someone standing across the parking lot. Just standing, tall, still, watching. When I blinked, they were gone. Since then, I've seen him more than once, in reflections, at the edge of crowds, just far enough that I can't make out his face. Just close enough to feel his eyes on me. I think I brought him back. I think he followed me. Every so often, I find footprints near my door, always bare, always wet. Sometimes I hear soft footsteps at night, on the stairs in the hall outside my bedroom. Once I heard them from inside my room. I keep the lights on now. I lock every door, every window. I haven't been back to the Hayward Loop in almost a year, but I still dream of running, and in every dream, he's getting closer. Story the end.
Story number 5.
I took up jogging when I moved to Vermont after the divorce. I needed something, anything, to get out of my own head. I had lost my house, my marriage, and most of my confidence in one fell swoop. I rented a small house near a stretch of dense woods and winding roads, not far from a town that had a general store and not much else. I figured a quiet life was what I needed, and I liked the idea of starting over somewhere peaceful. No distractions, no traffic, no memories. Jogging became my routine. Every morning at 6, I'd lace up and run the loop down the gravel path behind my house, through a patch of forest that looked postcard perfect, then around a looped dirt road locals called Penny Hollow. It was about 4.5 miles all told. Peaceful, quiet. I rarely saw anyone, just deer, birds, and sometimes the odd rusted car that had clearly been sitting for decades under layers of leaves. There was one spot along the trail that always gave me a weird feeling. Just past the mile mark, right where the forest got a little darker and the trees started leaning over the path, like they were whispering, There was an old stone wall and a narrow wooden bridge that passed over a dried-up stream. The first time I ran over it, I remember noticing how sudden the silence became. Like, even the birds didn't want to make noise there. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the way the trees grew in close made the acoustics change, deaden the sound or something. But every time I passed over that bridge, I'd get goosebumps. It wasn't even cold out. One morning, early October, I noticed something strange. On the side of the path right before the bridge, someone had left a shoe. Just one. It was old, caked in dirt, the laces knotted together. I figured someone dumped it, or maybe it had fallen out of a backpack. Weird, but not alarming. The next day, the shoe was still there, and on the opposite side of the trail, someone had stacked a pile of small rocks into a little tower, 6, maybe 7 stones high. A cairn, balanced just so. Something about it looked intentional, but not decorative, like a marker. I didn't touch it. I jogged past and picked up my pace at feeling that strange pressure again, like eyes on the back of my neck. That night, I had the first dream. I was running through the woods, barefoot, gasping. The trees were wrong. Too close together, the branches seemed to move. I could hear something behind me, not footsteps, but a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled along the dirt. I couldn't look back. I couldn't stop. The fear was suffocating, so visceral I woke up with my heart pounding, my sheets soaked through with sweat. I wrote it off. One bad dream, probably triggered by the stress of everything, or maybe something I ate, but it happened again the next night, and the next. Each dream got longer, more vivid. In one, I turned around. Just a glance. I saw something, tall, thin, with limbs too long and skin stretched tight like old leather. No face, just black hollows where eyes should have been. I stopped jogging for a few days after that. Slept in, told myself I was tired. But the dreams didn't stop. Even when I didn't run, I still had them. On the 5th morning, I went back to the trail. I needed to face it, reclaim the peace it had once given me. The sun was barely up, mist hanging low over the trees. I passed the shoe. It was still there. The cairn had toppled, and someone had made a new one, taller, right in the center of the path on the bridge. I slowed, staring at it. Something was carved into one of the stones, a small X and what looked like 3 vertical slashes. I didn't recognize the symbol. That night, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. No explanation. I hadn't been outside. I hadn't even opened a window. I cleaned up, went to the bathroom, and noticed something else in the mirror, a scrape across my cheek. Shallow but red, like a branch had swiped me. But I hadn't been in the woods. I started researching the area, trying to find any history that might explain what I was experiencing. I found an old town archive site and started digging into Penny Hollow. Not much came up, but there was one thread from a local historian blog that mentioned disappearances in the area dating back to the 1930s. Young men, usually alone, last seen going for walks or hikes near the hollow. Most of the disappearances were never solved, but one in particular stood out. A 19-year-old named Paul Dunning vanished in 1983. His car was found at the trailhead. His running shoes were left on the bridge. Same spot. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside, a single thud. Then another. I got up, peeked through the curtain, nothing. But the next morning, when I went to check the back steps, I found 2 things. A muddy footprint, bare, toes splayed wide as if someone had walked out of the woods and stood there, and next to it, another cairn, 3 stones, balanced on the railing. I stopped running completely. But the dreams came back anyway. More intense. I started waking up with bruises, faint but real, on my arms, my back. Once I found a small splinter embedded in my palm. I hadn't touched any wood. I began keeping the lights on at night. Locked every door. Stopped going into the woods at all. Then on Halloween morning, I woke up just after 4 a.m. I didn't remember the dream this time, but my heart was racing and my legs ached like I'd been running for hours. I went to the kitchen to get water. As I passed the back door, I saw it. Someone standing at the edge of the woods. Tall, still, barefoot, watching. I froze. They didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. I blinked and they were gone. That same day, I called a local ranger station, asked if there had been any sightings of trespassers or strange activity in the woods. The guy on the line was polite but firm. "That trail's old," he said. "Not well monitored. Locals know not to go out there too early or too late." Why? A pause. Some places hold things. You ever hear of a place that doesn't want you there? I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. Don't go alone, and don't run at dawn. That's when it walks. I hung up. That night, I dreamed again. Same trail, same woods. But this time, I wasn't running. I was standing on the bridge, and something was whispering beneath it. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel them. They felt like cold breath against my skin. Then a hand reached up through the boards, thin, gray, fingers with long black nails. It touched my ankle, and I screamed myself awake. I had a red mark where the hand touched me, like a burn. I packed a bag the next day, drove into town, got a motel. I didn't sleep, didn't go home for days. Eventually, I returned during full daylight. My yard looked normal. The trail was quiet, but I knew it was waiting. I moved 2 weeks later, took a job in another state, sold the house to a couple from New York who wanted a retreat from the city. I never told them. But sometimes when I jog now, always on paved streets, never near the woods, I swear I hear it. A second pair of footsteps, just behind me, matched to my pace. And when I slow down, it slows too. When I stop, the silence rushes in, but the air always feels colder, and every once in a while I see a shoe. Just one, left by the path, old, dirty, waiting. Story the end.
Story number 6.
I've always believed that most things in life have a logical explanation. I was raised that way. Science over superstition, reason over fear. But sometimes things happen that logic just can't touch, and no amount of rational thinking can wipe the image of something horrifying from your mind. That's what happened to me 2 years ago, and it all started with jogging. I was 28 then, living in a small rental house just outside of Albany, New York. It was a quiet area with a patch of woods nearby and a few suburban streets. I had recently come off a breakup that left me gutted and restless. Jogging became my escape. I'd never been particularly athletic, but something about the rhythm of my feet hitting pavement, the solitude of early mornings, helped me get through the worst of it. My routine was consistent. I ran around 5:30 every morning, just before the sun started to rise. The roads were empty, the air crisp, and the world felt still. I ran a loop, start at my house, down Ridgeview Avenue, cut through the wooded trail that led behind the middle school, loop around the park, and come back up the hill. The trail through the woods was about half a mile long, narrow and lined with thick trees. I liked it. It was always cool, the dirt soft underfoot, and on foggy mornings, it looked like something out of a painting. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. Sometimes I'd see other joggers, usually an older man in a blue tracksuit who nodded as we passed. Once in a while, a woman with a black lab on a leash. But most days, it was just me, the trail, and my thoughts. Then, one morning in late October, I noticed something odd. It was foggy, denser than usual, and the woods felt quieter than they should have. Even the birds weren't making their usual morning racket. I was jogging at my usual pace, sweat starting to bead on my forehead, despite the chill, when I saw someone ahead. At first, I thought it was the man in the tracksuit, but as I got closer, I saw it was a woman. Young, maybe early 20s, in a white t-shirt and gray leggings. Her feet were bare, which struck me as strange immediately, given the time of year. Her hair was dark, wet-looking, hanging over her shoulders. She was walking slowly, arms limp at her sides, her head slightly tilted as if she were listening for something. I slowed my pace as I got closer, planning to ask if she was okay, but something about her made me stop completely. She wasn't walking. She was floating. Her feet hovered just an inch above the ground. It was subtle. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking directly at her feet. But they weren't touching the leaves or the dirt. I froze. She turned her head slowly, unnaturally slow, and looked at me. Her eyes were wrong, not glowing or anything dramatic, just too wide, too empty, like they weren't meant to be seen from this world. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face didn't change. She just stared. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I tore through the rest of the trail and didn't stop running until I was back at my front door, heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out. That day, I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the fog, that maybe I was overtired or had low blood sugar. I hadn't eaten before the run, after all. I even looked up symptoms of hypoglycemia and hallucinations. I wanted to believe there was an answer, but something inside me knew. The next few days, I avoided the trail. I stuck to the streets, jogging loops around the block, even though I hated the uneven sidewalks and the occasional early commuter nearly brushing my shoulder. I didn't see her again, and slowly my nerves started to settle. A week passed. Then, one morning, I woke up to something strange. A trail of wet footprints led from my front door to the kitchen. I live alone. I didn't hear anything in the night, didn't leave a window open. My front door was locked, no signs of forced entry. But the footprints were there, small, barefoot, as if someone had walked through a puddle and then stepped inside. They were faint, starting to dry, but unmistakable. I followed them to the back door, which was also locked. I cleaned them up, telling myself it was probably just my own imagination, even though I knew they were too small to be mine and I hadn't gone outside. The next day, I went back to the trail. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself it wasn't real, that it was a fluke, that I was still in control of my own mind. It was another foggy morning. The trail was quiet. I kept a steady pace, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing out of the ordinary. No sign of her. Until I passed the small clearing near the halfway point, where the trail bends and the trees thin out. There she was, standing in the clearing. This time she was facing away from me. Her white shirt clung to her back like it was damp. Her arms hung stiffly, and her head tilted slightly as if listening. I stopped again, instinct screaming at me to turn around, but something held me there. Then she started running. Not toward me. Away. But she didn't move like a runner. Her arms didn't pump, her knees didn't rise. She just glided, fast and smooth like a film on fast forward. She disappeared into the trees within seconds. I ran home again, this time so terrified I nearly twisted my ankle on a root. I stopped jogging entirely after that. For a while, things were quiet. I avoided the trail, even sold my running shoes. I started doing yoga in the living room instead. I convinced myself that whatever I'd seen was done with me. Then came the dreams. They started subtle. Fog, trees, the feeling of being watched. Then they grew darker. I'd see her in them, always at the edge of my vision, never quite in focus. She'd stand in the shadows, head tilted, mouth slightly open like she wanted to say something. Sometimes she'd run toward me, arms stiff at her sides, her face still expressionless. I started waking up at 5:30 every morning, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. One morning, I woke to find mud on the sheets, just a smear near my feet. That was when I realized it wasn't just dreams. I started researching. Not ghost stories or myths, I wanted real history. I combed through old news articles, local records, anything I could find about the trail, the woods, the land before the neighborhood was built. What I found made my stomach turn. In 1998, a college student named Rachel Lynn went missing during her morning jog. She lived 2 blocks from where I do now. She was last seen wearing a white t-shirt and gray leggings. Witnesses said she jogged the trail behind the school almost every day. Her body was never found. Police searched the area thoroughly, but turned up nothing. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Some speculated she'd run away. Others believed she was abducted. Her parents never gave up searching, but after 5 years, the case went cold. The article included a photo. It was her, the woman I'd seen. Same dark hair, same eyes, same expression. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't exactly go to the police and say, "Hey, I think I saw the ghost of that missing girl from 20 years ago." So I did nothing. I locked my doors, slept with the lights on, and tried to forget. But she didn't forget me. A month later, I was getting ready for bed when I heard something outside, a soft, rhythmic thump, like someone running. I looked out my bedroom window. The backyard was empty, except for a faint figure in the fog, standing just at the tree line. She was still, watching. When I stepped back, my phone lit up. An unknown number, no message, no voicemail, just the timestamp, 5:30 a.m. The next morning, I found wet footprints on the deck, barefoot, small, leading from the woods to the back door. I moved out a month later, took a job offer in Chicago just to get away. New apartment, new life. But I still wake up at 5:30 every morning, and sometimes I hear footsteps in the hallway. Soft, rhythmic, running. Story the end.
Story number 7.
When I started jogging again after the divorce, it was supposed to be about taking control of my body, my routine, my life. I chose the neighborhood trail because it looped around a little patch of suburban woods right behind my apartment complex. Safe, familiar, or so I thought. I never expected to find something out there that made me question reality, something I still can't explain without sounding crazy. It was mid-September when I picked up jogging again. The evenings were cool, the trees beginning to hint at color changes. I usually went after work, around 6:30 p.m., just as the sun dipped low enough to paint the sky pink and gold. The trail was about 3 miles, a loop with gentle hills paved the whole way. It curved through the edge of the woods, then doubled back behind the row of duplexes that faced the main road. There were always people around in the evenings. Dog walkers, joggers like me, the occasional kid on a scooter. I felt comfortable there. But on a Friday evening, September 15th, I jogged a little later than usual. I'd stayed late at work, answering emails and tying up end-of-week tasks. By the time I got home, the sun was already sinking behind the trees. I almost didn't go, but I didn't want to break the routine. I changed, grabbed my earbuds, and headed out. There were fewer people on the trail than usual, maybe 1 or 2 walkers and a couple walking a golden retriever, but otherwise it was empty. The woods felt darker than they should have for that hour. Maybe cloud cover, I thought. I clicked on a podcast and settled into my rhythm. Around the first mile, I felt it. That strange prickling feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I looked around and saw no one. I wasn't scared, just uneasy. I chalked it up to being alone and jogged on. Halfway through the loop, there's a narrow wooden bridge that crosses over a dry creek bed. The bridge is old but sturdy, with metal rails on either side. It's about 20 feet long. On that night, as I stepped onto the bridge, my left earbud popped out. Not unusual. I've always had trouble keeping them in. I stopped, turned back to retrieve it, and that's when I saw him. A man was standing at the entrance of the bridge where I'd just come from. He wasn't there 30 seconds earlier. I didn't hear him approach. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. He wore dark clothes, gray hoodie, black pants, and old running shoes. He stood still, arms at his sides, staring right at me. His face was in shadow, but I could tell he wasn't smiling. Just blank. Staring. I froze. Something about him felt off, like when you see a mannequin that's too lifelike. No movement, no shifting weight from one leg to another. Just frozen. I nodded at him awkwardly and turned back to walk off the bridge. When I looked over my shoulder again, he was gone. No footsteps. No rustling leaves. Just empty trail. My stomach dropped. I walked faster, then broke into a jog. I didn't look back again. When I got home, I laughed it off. Told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe my nerves. The guy probably stepped off the trail into the trees or turned around when I wasn't looking. The next few nights, I skipped jogging, but the feeling lingered. By Monday, I talked myself back into it. I needed the routine. I told myself if I saw anything weird again, I'd just head back. No big deal. That night, I started the loop earlier, around 6:15. Still plenty of daylight. Nothing strange happened for the first 2 miles. Birds chirped. A woman passed me going the other direction with a poodle on a pink leash. But as I rounded the bend before the bridge, I saw something lying on the path. It was a shoe, one old, dirty running shoe. Just one. It wasn't there the last time I ran. I would have noticed. I slowed down and glanced into the woods, wondering if someone had dropped it. But there was no one in sight. I stepped over it and continued on, quickening my pace. I didn't see anyone on the bridge this time, but I didn't linger. The next night, there were 2 shoes. Same kind, same condition, placed side by side. This time, I turned around and went back the way I came. When I got home, I texted my sister. "Hey, random question. You ever feel creeped out on running trails?" She replied almost immediately. "Haha, yes, all the time. Why? Think I saw a weird guy the other night. Now someone's leaving shoes on the path. Like a homeless person? Maybe, just feels deliberate." Stay safe. Maybe switch trails? I wanted to, but something pulled me back. The next day at work, I found myself Googling missing persons in my area. Just curiosity, I told myself. A way to calm my imagination. I wish I hadn't looked. A man named Kevin Bright had gone missing the year before. Last seen jogging near my trail. Reports said he left for a run and never came back. Police searched the woods. Nothing. No clothes, no phone, no body. His family posted flyers. No leads. He looked about 30. Athletic, wore a hoodie and black running pants in the photo. The hairs on my arms stood up. I didn't jog that night, but Thursday I went back. I told myself I'd only walk the first half mile. I just wanted to see if the shoes were still there. They weren't. Instead, there was something else. a gray hoodie, folded neatly on the bridge rail. I stopped a few yards away, staring at it. I felt this pressure, like the air was thicker, heavier around me. The trees were silent, no wind, no birds. I reached for my phone to take a photo. As I lifted it, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, soft. I spun around. No one. My breath came shallow. I turned back to the hoodie. Gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement. I ran. The next morning, I woke up early, not to jog, to drive to the police station. I told them about the hoodie, the shoes, the man I'd seen. The officer who took my statement was polite, but I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was exaggerating, maybe even a little unwell. You say he didn't speak to you? Didn't threaten you? No, but it wasn't right. Something about him didn't feel human. He raised an eyebrow. I know how it sounds, I said. They agreed to send someone to check the trail. That night, I forced myself to stay home. I watched TV with all the lights on. I even moved a chair in front of the door, which felt ridiculous. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brought something back with me. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Something was scratching at my window, not tapping. Scratching. I live on the second floor. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound stopped. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. There was nothing there. Except on the grass below, just barely visible in the moonlight, was a single gray hoodie laid flat on the lawn. I shut the blinds and sat up until sunrise. The next morning, the hoodie was gone. I called my sister. I didn't even try to sound calm. I think I saw a ghost, I told her. From the trail? Yeah, I think he followed me. She was quiet for a moment. You said he was wearing a hoodie and running shoes, right? Yeah, that's what I said. I just remembered something, she said slowly. This is going to sound crazy, but when we were kids, remember that story Mom used to tell about the jogger? I paused. Sort of. It was like an urban legend, right? Yeah. She said a man disappeared on a trail near our old house. People said he never stopped running, even after death. He'd appear behind lone joggers, matching their pace. If you looked back 3 times, he'd follow you home. I shivered. I thought it was just a dumb story. Me too. But it wasn't dumb anymore. I didn't go back to the trail after that. I took the long way to work to avoid it. I started jogging at the gym instead, treadmill safely surrounded by other people. Weeks passed. I tried to forget. Then one night in October, my upstairs neighbor knocked on my door. I barely knew him, just a guy in his 30s with a loud stereo and a love of grilling on his balcony. Hey, he said, shifting awkwardly. Weird question. Do you go jogging around here? Used to, I said. Why? I was on the trail last night, just after dark. I think I saw someone following me. Gray hoodie. Didn't say anything, just stared. My stomach turned. You okay? Yeah, he said. Just creeped me out. He paused. You ever hear about someone disappearing out there? I nodded slowly. You should be careful, I said. That night, I dreamt of the trail again. Only this time I wasn't jogging. I was standing still, and I could hear someone behind me breathing, inching closer with every second. When I turned around, he was right there. Mouth open wide in a silent scream, eyes black as tar, face pale and blank and terrible. I haven't jogged outside since. Sometimes I still walk past the edge of the woods on my way to the store, just for a second. And every now and then I swear I see a figure standing just beyond the trees, motionless, watching, waiting. They say if you see him once, you're lucky. If you see him twice, you should stop running. But if you see him 3 times, he never leaves you. I don't know how many times I've seen him now. But I don't run anymore. I don't even try. Story the end.